Throughout history, many books have been considered a source of light for understanding wisdom, but there have also been works that were banned and not included in the official Bible. One of those books is the Wisdom of Sirach, also known as the Book of Ecclesiasticus, a profound work by an ancient Jewish scholar. This book contains advice on moral living, on how to live by God and human values, but was banned by some churches and not recognized as part of the official Bible. So why was a book full of wisdom and morality removed from the Bible? This question is not only related to the history of religion, but also opens up thoughts about how people have understood and communicated the teachings of God. Today, we will learn why the Book of Wisdom of Sirach was banned and the lessons we can learn from this book in a modern context of challenge and truth-seeking. Number 1. Humility, the path to respect and inner strength. In the pages of the Book of Sirach, also known as the Wisdom Book of Ben Sirach, we find a profound lesson in virtue that many of us could learn from: humility. Written by a Jewish teacher who lived in the 2nd century BC, the Book of Sirach is not simply a work of morality, but also practical advice for the life of every believer. In it, Sirach shows that humility is not only a virtue to have in a relationship with God, but also a path to true respect and blessing. These words were not only valid in his time, but are also eternal truths that can guide us in living rightly in today's world. According to Sirach, humility is not a matter of self-abasement or self-abasement. It is a clear awareness of one's limitations and respect for God, the great Creator. Humility is a path to holiness, the key that opens the door to genuine respect from God and others. It is a special virtue that God loves, for He always looks for humble people who know how to humble themselves before Him and those around them. The Book of Sirach not only teaches humility as an act of showing respect to God, but also affirms that humility is the source of inner strength. A humble person understands that he cannot do everything by himself. He knows that true strength comes from God. The strength of a humble person is not resilience or independence, but obedience and surrender to God. This does not mean that they are weak, but on the contrary, it is in humility that they find the inner strength to overcome all challenges. As Sirach wrote, "A humble person will find strength in his own heart and will be blessed by God." Sirach chapter 10, verses 20. On the contrary, pride, according to the Book of Sirach, is the path to downfall and destruction. The proud person who thinks he is the center of the universe is the one who does not realize that everything comes from God. He believes that he can do everything by himself without God's help, and thus he gradually moves away from Him. But when faced with failure and suffering, he realizes that pride only leads to destruction. Sirach warned, "Pride goes before a fall." Sirach 10:7. This is a clear reminder of the dangers of pride, arrogance, and lack of humility in life. Humility is also a sign of true wisdom. Humble people never consider themselves the most important. They know that respect and love for God and people are what truly matter. In God's eyes, unassuming people are the ones who are loved by Him, because they understand that wisdom does not come from pride but from sincere submission and love. It is a life lived for others and for God, not just for oneself. God will bless those humble and live with a respectful heart. Wisdom will come naturally to them. Through the teachings of the Book of Sirach, we can realize that humility is not an easy virtue to practice, but it is something that every believer needs to strive for every day. Humility is not being humble in action, but accepting one's limitations and understanding that only God can give us true life and strength. We cannot survive in this world without His help. Humility is obedience and surrender to God, and it is the path to the respect, peace, and holiness that God wants us to achieve. To gain genuine respect, each of us must learn to be humble. We must humble ourselves, not only before God but also before those around us. Humility is not weakness but strength from within, the ability to realize that we cannot do everything alone. In humility, we find true strength, peace, and the presence of God in our lives. The teaching on humility in the Book of Sirach is a valuable lesson for all of us, not only in Sirach's time, but also in our time today. Remember that humility is a virtue and a path to genuine respect and holiness. And when we learn to be humble, we will receive God's blessing, find inner strength, and live a meaningful life. Number 2. Friendship and integrity, the secret to building lasting relationships. In this life, a good friend is not only someone who shares joys and sorrows with you, but also a companion on the journey of maturity and self-improvement. The friendships we build will profoundly affect our life path and character. Therefore, finding sincere and trustworthy friends is one of the precious treasures each person can possess. True friendship is not just a simple social bond. It is understanding, respecting, and sympathizing with each other. A good friend will always be there when we encounter difficulties, give wise advice when needed, and help us see more clearly the right directions in life. It is these friends who will help us build a meaningful life, whole of love and integrity. Friendship cannot be measured by quantity, but by quality and sustainability. A true friend is someone who will stand by us not only in happy times, but also when we face significant challenges. However, not everyone understands the importance of choosing friends. A person's character is not only formed by himself, but also profoundly influenced by the people he associates with. If we make friends with good virtues, live positively, and always set an example for each other, we will develop in a better direction. On the contrary, if we make friends with people with bad influences, we will likely be drawn into wrong actions and lose our moral values. This book gives a simple but profound advice. Choose your friends. Don't let bad friends ruin you. Stories from history and modern life have proven that friendships can profoundly impact a person's destiny. Good friends will help us overcome difficulties, while bad friends can drag us down a dark path. An indispensable element in friendship is the ability to communicate wisely. Words can build or destroy a relationship. Therefore, a good friend will know how to use his words to encourage and motivate, instead of criticizing or hurting others. This book also shares some essential principles to help us develop positive communication skills and build lasting relationships. First of all, listen and understand others. Before speaking, make sure you clearly understand the problem and feelings of the other person. A word at the right time, in the right place, can change another person's life. Choose your words carefully. Avoid saying things that might hurt or strain the relationship. And most importantly, share with good intentions, not just for the sake of arguing. A sincere conversation will help deepen and sustain your friendship. Also, one of the most essential things in friendship is to avoid speaking ill of others, especially friends. In any situation, spreading gossip or criticizing others behind their backs damages the relationship and affects our honor and trust. The book advises, if you can't say anything nice about someone, keep quiet. Being silent at such times is not a sign of weakness, but a sign of integrity and respect for others. This advice helps us maintain respect and protect the stability of our friendship. In addition to choosing friends carefully and communicating wisely, an indispensable factor in building relationships is setting an example for friends. Integrity is not only expressed in words, but also actions. We cannot ask friends to live with integrity if we ourselves are not a good example for them. Therefore, live a good life, show sincere concern, and always do the right thing, even under challenging circumstances. We need to set an example for our friends in the way we live, the way we treat others, and the way we overcome challenges in life. Finally, the book concludes that a good friend must not be perfect. They may have flaws, but they will always be the ones who help us perfect ourselves. When we live with integrity and respect for each other, friendship will become a priceless gift, helping us overcome all difficulties in life. It is a precious asset that everyone should cherish and preserve. Honest friendship and the right choice in relationships affect our lives and largely determine our future success and happiness. Good friends will be a great motivation to help us constantly move forward, reach for noble goals, and create a meaningful life, full of love and understanding. Number 3, compassion and justice, the power of practical action. In the book of Sirach, one of the profound and core lessons of faith is justice and compassion, especially towards the poor and oppressed. These teachings are not just advice, but vital instructions in the journey to follow God's will. Social justice in Sirach is not an abstract concept, but concrete actions, fairness, and care for those who are suffering in society. The first call that Sirach emphasizes is compassion for the poor and oppressed. In a society where the gap between rich and poor is increasingly deep, the poor often face deprivation and neglect, even exploitation. Sirach invites each person to recognize and understand their pain, to empathize and act. Treat the poor as if you were poor yourself, and remember that you too may be in trouble. Sirach chapter 1 verse 4. This is not only a reminder to share, but also an invitation for each individual to open their hearts, not only in words, but also in concrete actions. However, compassion does not stop at sympathy, but must also be expressed in generous actions. Sirach calls us to sympathize with the poor and help them, sparing no effort and resources. In a world where people are often caught up in the race to accumulate personal wealth, Sirach reminds us that wealth is temporary and not eternal. Do good to the poor and the lonely, for justice will be rewarded. Sirach 3:30. This is a powerful call to generosity, reminding us that generosity is not only a moral obligation, but also a reflection of God's love for humanity. At the same time, Sirach also warns of the danger of exploiting the weak in society. Even with power and wealth, the rich can easily take advantage of the weakness of the poor for their gain. However, Sirach warns that these actions will not escape God's judgment. Do not rob the poor because they are poor, and do not oppress the needy. Sirach 4 verses 1, verse 10. This is a powerful reminder of social justice, which requires each person to respect the rights and dignity of others, especially the most vulnerable. Social justice, as Sirach affirms, is not a concept that can be separated from faith in God. A life according to God's will cannot be without justice and compassion for the poor. If you treat the poor justly, you will not be condemned, for God will not overlook the righteous deeds. Sirach 35:17. Justice is not just a moral principle, but an essential part of the journey of following God's will, requiring us to live a just life in which everyone is treated with dignity and rights, without discrimination or oppression. The overall message that Sirach conveys is not simply about sharing material things, but also about maintaining an attitude of living that is just, kind, and respectful of all people. Social justice in Sirach is an invitation to live with compassion and generosity, not only in words, but also in concrete actions, in daily life. It is about helping the poor and protecting the rights of vulnerable groups in society. Today, in the modern context, the call of Sirach is still valid. Social justice is about helping the poor and protecting the rights of vulnerable groups such as migrants, the oppressed, and those excluded from society. To build a just and peaceful society, individuals and communities must demonstrate compassion and concrete action, not just through promises but through practical actions. In modern society, social justice remains one of the core values of a community living according to God's will. Put this, he continued, in this way, social justice is not something distant or abstract, but an integral part of our daily lives. The book of Sirach, through its teachings, not only guides us on how to live rightly, but also on how to build a more just and compassionate society. Social justice is not just about helping the poor, but about creating a culture where everyone can live with respect and love, where justice is practiced and compassion is demonstrated in every action. Number 4. Wealth and righteousness, lessons of moderation in life. Exercise. In today's world, where wealth is often seen as a measure of success, there is a profound lesson to be learned from one of the wisest books in the Bible. The book of Sirach, also known as the book of Ecclesiasticus, contains advice on morality and Christian living, with warnings about the temptations of wealth and greed. Wealth in Sirach. Wealth is not a bad thing in Sirach, but the blind pursuit of it can cause people to lose sight of essential values in life. Sirach does not condemn wealth, but he reminds us that letting wealth dominate us can lead to pride, greed, and a departure from the righteous path of God. In Sirach 31:1-2, the author advises that wealth must be used wisely and not become a goal, the only goal in life. Only by learning to live in moderation can we maintain righteousness, a virtue more precious than any material possession. Wealth cannot bring true happiness if it blinds us, causing us to overlook more important things like faithfulness and love. Greed and righteousness. Greed is one of the most dangerous traps that humans can fall into. The Book of Sirach warns that greed can cause us to abandon our moral values and damage our relationship with God. Sirach 13:24 points out that those who pursue wealth improperly will face God's judgment. Money can blind us and make us forget righteousness, causing us to go astray. Unbridled greed can lead to immoral actions and even crime to gain wealth. This warning is not just for the wealthy, but for all of us who can easily be tempted by the desire to possess more, even though we may not really need it. Righteousness must come first. And we must always keep our faith, not allowing wealth to shake our trust in God. Moderation and righteousness. One of the strengths of the Book of Sirach is its advice on moderation. Moderation is not simply about controlling greed, but also about the ability to live a life in harmony with what we have, not letting ourselves be carried away by material values. Sirach advises that, instead of seeking endless wealth, we must live with contentment and acceptance of what we have. Moderation helps us not to be dominated by money and material things, and thus we can maintain righteousness in all circumstances. In Sirach 10:9, the author affirms that righteousness will lead us to blessing, and those who are steadfast in faith will not fail. This reminds us that when we live righteously and moderately, we will find peace of mind and a strong relationship with God. Only when we live with dignity and morality can we receive His protection and blessings. Criticizing the pursuit of wealth at the expense of morality. The Book of Sirach also strongly criticizes those who only focus on wealth at the expense of righteousness. Sirach 5:01, verse 8, makes it clear that those who only pursue money will never find peace of mind, because wealth is unstable and can disappear at any time. Those who set their hearts on wealth will never find true happiness, because they live in haste and worry about preserving their possessions. Instead of fearing money, we must focus on more intangible but precious values, such as honesty, kindness, and faithfulness to God. Wealth cannot bring happiness, but living righteously and helping others is the path to true peace. Honesty and righteousness over wealth. The Book of Sirach makes it clear that honesty and righteousness are virtues that bring lasting value, while the pursuit of wealth can bring negative consequences. In Sirach 3:30, the author makes the analogy that water and fire do not mix, similar to the fact that wealth and righteousness cannot go together without moderation. Honesty and righteousness must always be the guiding principles in all our decisions, so we can live a life in harmony with God and those around us. Advice on the use of wealth. Finally, the Book of Sirach offers efficient advice on how to use wealth in our daily lives. Sirach 29:10-13 emphasizes that we should use our wealth to help the poor, to give to charity, and to avoid being dominated by greed. When we use our wealth wisely and for the good of the community, wealth will not become a burden but a tool to serve God and others. Number 5. Honoring parents and elders. Sacred values in life. One of the critical lessons we can learn from the Bible is to honor parents and elders. This moral value is not only emphasized in ancient books, but continues to have profound value in today's world. Honoring parents is not only a social obligation, but also an act of worship to God, because through them we learn valuable lessons about love, loyalty, and wisdom that God has given us. The Book of Sirach and Wise Advice. The Book of Sirach, also known as Ecclesiasticus, is one of the wisdom books in the Old Testament, written by the sage Ben Sirach around the 2nd century BC. This book not only contains advice on moral, social, and family life, but also serves as a profound guide for us to live a righteous, moral, and God-fearing life. Among these, one of the most important lessons is to honor our parents and elders. Honoring parents is a sacred duty. Honoring parents in the Book of Sirach is not only an act of filial piety, but also a sacred command linked to the relationship between children and God. The Book of Sirach says, Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. Sirach 3:6. This teaching emphasizes the close connection between honoring your parents and the long life that God gives you. This shows that, in the eyes of God, caring for and honoring your parents is not only a human duty, but also an act of fearing Him. When children respect their parents, they are not only showing love for them, but also respecting God, who has given them life and love. Respect for the elderly. Respect for wisdom. The Book of Sirach also does not forget to mention respect for the elderly, a significant value in living according to God's will. The elderly often have experienced many challenges in life, bringing with them valuable experiences and lessons from God. Therefore, respecting them is not only an act of respect for an individual, but also a tribute to the wisdom that God has given them. The Book of Sirach says, "Listen to the wisdom of the elderly, who have gone through many trials and know how to distinguish between good and evil." Sirach 8:9. Through this, we understand that respect for the elderly is not only a social act, but also a way of showing respect for God's wisdom. Honoring parents and elders, honoring God. One of the essential lessons in the Book of Sirach is the connection between honoring parents and elders and praising God. Honoring parents is not only a social act, but also an act of worship to God. This is shown through keeping God's commandments, especially the fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother, Exodus 20:12. When we honor our parents, we are not only following their teachings, but also following the will of God, who created and gave us our families. In the same way, honoring our elders is also honoring God's wisdom. Elders are people who have lived through challenging times and have learned to distinguish between right and wrong. Therefore, when we honor them, we are not only honoring them as people, but also celebrating the wisdom that God has given them. Meaning in today's life, the teaching in the Book of Sirach about honoring parents and elders still holds in modern life. In today's society, where many moral values may be forgotten, respecting parents and elders becomes a way to live according to God's will. It encourages children to show love to their parents and learn from the wisdom of elders who have gone through many trials and can guide us on the right paths in life. Honoring parents and elders in modern life is a moral act and a way to live according to God's will, living with humility and respect. It is an act that brings blessings to us and contributes to building a good society where filial piety and respect are always appreciated. The Wisdom of Sirach, part of the Apocrypha, is a valuable source of profound lessons on morality, human life, and the fear of God. However, the reason why this book is banned in many Christian traditions may not only be because its contents seem to differ from the canonical books of the Bible, but also because its teachings can complicate the understanding of the relationship between man and God. Although the Book of Sirach contains many wise advices, determining the authority of God and the relationship between knowledge and holiness is not easy, leading to controversy in accepting or rejecting it in some Christian communities. However, the lesson we learn from the Wisdom of Sirach is that the wisdom that comes from God always teaches us to live humbly, fear God, and not let intellectual pride deprive us of faithful service and morality. The counsels from God are not only guidance for spiritual life, but also lessons in humility, constantly seeking truth and love in all our actions. If you find these lessons helpful and want to explore more about other deep topics in the Bible, don't forget to follow and subscribe to our channel to stay updated with the latest videos on spiritual lessons and teachings of God.